So what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is, the theme today is AI, and I wanted to just a short presentation on a little bit on how the pharma industry is looking at AI and ML and drug discovery, and then specifically a little bit about, since we're a corporate venture capital firm, and what we're doing on behalf of investing for not only Merck but the industry in AI and ML in drug discovery, give you a little feel for how we're looking at it and what we kind of think about it going forward. So if you don't know, again, my name is Bill Taranto. As introduction, I'm president of the Merck Global Health Innovation Fund. We were a fund that was established in 2010, and our primary mission really, even though we invest in something called pharma services, which is as simple as it sounds, so pharma needs a service, that's kind of what we look at across the entire value chain of pharmaceutical. Our main goal is to really try to improve patient lives and save lives. That's really when we think about investing, what we try to do. We were established in 2010. Most people don't know, we were actually a really small fund when we started. We were a $125 million fund. And actually today, we were a $600 million fund with another $150 million of approval to get up to $750 million. We're an evergreen fund that mostly focuses on growth investing. So Series C or later, we're doing A and B round occasion, but we don't do any startup or seed capital, but mostly, growth equity. What's interesting about our fund, where we, sort of the holy grail of our investing is where we can do an equity investment and Merck partners with our company through a commercial agreement. And today, we made over 90 actually investments today with some 40 exits, but we're sitting on around 50 portfolio companies. About 75% or so of our companies are in an engagement with Merck. And what's important about that is that also helps then our parent company learn to use technology in their business, but also helps the industry as well, because we want multiple pharmas to be clients of these types of companies. What's also interesting is that if you look at our whole portfolio, the majority of the portfolio actually has some AI component, and it's everything across drug discovery, clinical development. We do a lot in supply chain, access to medicines, and real world evidence and data. And all those areas that we invest in, pretty much every single company, they're all data companies, but they all have some component in AI. So it's actually becoming really more important to not only what we're doing as an investor, but also the industry. So AI does have the potential to really change the paradigm of drug discovery. But the biggest issue, and if most of you are familiar with our industry, is it's extremely expensive and a long process to hopefully get a drug to market. Typically, on average, $2.5 billion. It takes over 10 years to get it to market. And the other issue that we do face is that most things actually don't make it. There's an 80 to 90% failure rate. So imagine investing $2.5 billion in 10 different things, only one makes it. That's a lot of expenditure. The other interesting thing is there's a lot of rising costs associated now with drug discovery. The ROI is a lot less than it used to be, and it's actually dropped quite a bit over the last decade. And then there's insufficient knowledge. As much as we know about science, the human body is very complex. There's a large amount of research data accumulated that can be difficult for us as humans to actually go through that data. The great thing is AI has potential to address all that. Everything from advances in AI science, accrue large amounts of data, being able to go through all that data, and all the enhanced computing power actually means AI for drug discovery leads to better probability of success. That we can actually, if you think about it, what if we can get identify a compound or a molecule 5 or 6 years earlier than we do, after scanning thousands of different types of compounds in a 1-month period. If you get that to market earlier, it means lower costs, better efficiency, and better outcomes for the patient. And it's just better for the whole system if we can do that much quicker. And of course, for pharma, it ultimately saves money for them. So it can be used to address a lot of challenges actually in drug discovery. So one of the biggest areas that we're actually investing in, I'll talk about a little later, is this whole idea of target ID and validation. Now the interesting thing is almost every pharma, this is probably the biggest area of capital deployment in R&D, is in this AI and ML and drug discovery. And this piece of target ID or the next bucket, sort of that hit ID and hit to lead, where we're investing on a capital, but actually nobody's actually validated a drug yet using AI, but we think it's close. We're seeing tons of progress, and we think within the next year or so, you're actually going to see a validated drug that'll move all the way through the clinical process and get to market in a shorter period of time, and that's what's exciting. So, but it's all around, the ID disease mechanism network. It's all around drug ability predictions, protein structure, biomarker discovery, and then as we move to the right, we're talking about virtual screening, structure activity, drug repurposing, and then getting more towards lead optimization and preclinical studies. That's where we want to move to, and especially in preclinical studies, is really understanding how we can get better data around dosing, safety, efficacy, and how we can really formulate the drug to get to market faster in a safer, manner that ultimately leads to outcomes. But this is sort of the main area that pharma is focusing. All of us, there's no difference between us, Pfizer, J&J, Novartis. We're all looking generally at this in the same fashion and trying to use it in these 4 areas of R&D. So for us, we've approached it in an interesting way. Yes, we're in 3 of those areas, from target ID, hit ID, and then lead optimization. But we think about it in 3 categories. We look at it through biology, chemistry, and vaccine. So we're actually investing in 3 different areas of R&D, and partly because that's a little bit how Merck is structured and how Merck wants us to look at the types of companies that could be within this space. So the interesting thing for us too is, instead of not just cutting across the functional areas, but we do cut across different modalities and different therapeutic areas. And so this is our portfolio. You can see we have actually quite a bit of investments today in 2 of the areas. We're not in lead optimization yet, but we're looking for companies within that area. But today we have some 12 or 15 investments that make up this sort of area of AI and ML and drug discovery. Again, we haven't anything validated yet, but we feel really good that we're getting close to doing that. And again, it's across multiple therapeutic areas. The biggest concentration for us, if you know Merck, we're a big biopharm company now, mostly oncology. We have the largest drug in the world, Keytruda, which is a miracle oncology drug with over 20 indications and more coming. So the biggest area that we're focusing on still is oncology. But again, we have vaccines, we have cardiology, we have immunology. So a lot of different areas that we're focusing our efforts from an investment perspective. And lastly, despite the promise, there's a lot of challenges still with AI in drug discovery. Interesting enough, there's a big talent shortage. There's insufficient talent or expertise in both AI and the life sciences in order to do the kind of work that we're looking for. What that represents, though, is a huge opportunity for universities to train people in this sort of methodology and expertise, and actually fuel a pretty big opportunity for students who want to enter life sciences. But there's actually a big talent drain right now in this particular area. And what happens is, actually most people that do get trained in sort of this technology end up going more to the technology firms, the Googles, the Apples. They don't come necessarily to life sciences. So we have to figure out a way to make it more attractive for these students to come work for us instead of always going to the big technology firms. Another big issue is around data and access. The quality of data sets needed for training useful predictive AI models and generation of new data can be costly and time sensitive for us. And advances in automation and wet lab tools could help surmount some of these problems that we have around the data and the access. And the last one, it actually just kind of came up a little bit. We had a board dinner last night and a conversation just generally about AI, and John Hammett raised the fact that how dependent are we on it? Are we using it the right way? But there are some ethical and legal and regulatory issues around it. And interestingly, we see it more, not so much in the drug discovery space, but there's still potential issues that we have, because not all data is available for use in modeling, and progress is hampered by potential black box issues and patentability. But as you move towards the patient side, one of the things that where AI becomes, questionable is what if we found out something about a patient I wasn't supposed to find out? What's my obligation to report that to the patient? I was querying something that maybe was for, around my drug discovery research, but then I found something out that I wasn't supposed to. What are all the ramifications, legal and ethical, about telling somebody that you found something out you weren't supposed to find out? And are we supposed to tell them? So I think as you move more towards the patient access side, we're probably going to need some regulatory interference to help us understand, how do we better manage that kind of information as we go forward. But at least in the area of drug discovery, that's the biggest area pharma's investing in as it at least relates to what we do. We're also looking at it in the clinical development, so better understanding of how we do patient identification, patient stratification. Believe it or not, there's a tremendous amount of AI being used now in the supply chain. Maybe people don't know that we lose a bit of our product to fraud, theft, damaged goods. We ship it the wrong way. We were supposed to send it by plane. We actually send it by boat. So logistically, we actually struggle a lot. But how do you use AI to better track and trace raw materials coming in and finished goods going out? And then, as I said, the patient access piece we're still looking at, but have to be very careful where we're placing investment because we just don't understand the ethical and legal and regulatory issues. But the good news is, at least as it relates to drug discovery, this is a really exciting time for pharma. We're going to continue to deploy a lot of capital in this space, and what's hopeful is that within the next year, we'll validate a particular drug. Thank you, and I appreciate your time.
What impact on progress in the use and discovery development, any do you see with all the changes in the FDA?
I mean, that's a tough question to answer. I think, for us, we have to work with every administration. We have to just figure out a way to better work with, whatever the changes are in the FDA. But I do think though that what we've seen is very positive around the use of these types of technologies and enhancements. So there's the positive around that and want us to engage in these technologies. Because ultimately it is better for the system, it's better for pharma if these things work and we do get drugs to market soon at a much lower cost. And as you know, part of the reason costs are high here is because we service the rest of the world when it comes to drugs. So if we can do it cheaper, that makes it better. But what we've seen so far is a high propensity for approvals and the FDA wanting us to use these types of, and this is all digital. I mean, we're slowly seeing, just forget AI and drug discovery for a minute, all of digital is being, pushed as a way to move forward as we think of life sciences.
Hi, Michael Joseph with Visualier. What are you thinking about the application of the clinical trials, application of AI to clinical trials, and fusing the inclusion exclusion criteria along with more automated patient selection at maybe the point of care?
That's exactly where it's going. I think patient identification, patient stratification is where AI has become really useful. We actually invested in a company called NPower that actually, it was just mandated by the FDA that we do diversity in clinical trial recruiting. But how do you find those patients, right? And this particular company uses an AI methodology to actually go out to not the hospital setting, but the more clinic-based setting, and actually try to find those patients using different algorithms. But that's a big piece of patient identification, patient stratification is getting diversity within clinical trials. It can't be all white males that are 50 years old, right? So I think, and this is an area that pharma's been a little slow to adopt because the old-fashioned way works, even though it's extremely expensive. And there's a risk involved in pharma adopting it, but they're slowly but surely in the clinical development side, knowing as you move forward, we can't sustain the way we do the clinical trials in the past. So this technology is going to, I think, help us going forward.
Quick follow-up. Are the CROs engaging with these types of companies? What's that company you mentioned?
NPower, yes.
So they work with the CROs?
They work with both pharma and the CROs.
Yeah.